Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fauscette. Each week, we interview experts in artificial intelligence, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. Welcome. Today's our November edition of AI Pulse. You probably noticed my co-host there, Tom Pringle. Tom, good to see you.
Hello there.
So we're going to take a look at a whole bunch of interesting AI news for the past month. There's been a very, very active month, especially when you add in a bit of earnings there at the end to just to spice things up a little bit.
Yeah, no one was waiting for those results, were
Not at all. No, I think I'm surprised they hit. I mean, what was it, 67% growth or something? Anyway,
they?
we'll get there. We'll get to that one. But I want to start somewhere though. I was thinking about this the other day when I was watching an update on Slack not long ago from Salesforce, and and some things that some features they added, and we can talk about that in a bit. But what popped up was this sort of flashback to 2008, and you'll get a kick out of this because I'm sure you remember this era when all of a sudden everybody had to have enterprise search. Now they had to have enterprise search because their data infrastructure was just crap, and and the only way
Oh,
they could
harsh,
figure
harsh.
I mean, come on. The only way they could figure out to get past the fact that nothing talked to itself was to put something over the top to connect it, which also didn't really work. But I mean, I guess it sort of worked. But now all of a sudden we're talking about organizational intelligence, and I'm like, okay, did we go back to the future? Which I guess we always sort of do in tech, right? I mean, it's a problem we've been trying to solve for how long?
Well,
Um,
right, yeah, and that's just it, isn't it? It's the classic, kind of idea, principle, great principle, really interesting. Tech wasn't quite there yet,
yeah,
and I think it's interesting what you say. What I remember about the enterprise search days is A, not a lot, so B, don't quote me, but C, it was more along the lines of because a lot of folks didn't necessarily have the right data governance and protection measures in
mhm.
place, you like start searching for things and find out what your boss's salary was, or something like that. Something you're not
Yeah.
meant to
Yeah.
know.
Well, I mean, it was a way to get to things that you couldn't figure, but I mean, integration's never been easy. It's easier now maybe than it was, but that was kind of poor man's integration. I used to think of it anyway.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well because I think I suspect we're going down this path of organizational AI, and that the article that we were talking about the other day. And it's interesting to me because I think we've got a very similar problem now, which is we're putting on this AI glue, filler, whatever, to kind of
Opportunity, excitement. Anyway, go ahead.
your mileage may vary. I believe that's a thing they say on
Mm.
commercials. Um, but no, 100%. But it's interesting because I think it's the same story again in a different guise, which is to your point, um, who's done the data work to make this happen?
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting though. I like this quote from it was a Fast Company article that we're
Mm,
talking about around organizational intelligence. And this I thought this actually captures what I've been thinking about for a bit about this. And that is they said organizational intelligence blends human creativity, judgment, context, and intent with AI strength for driving automation, data synthesis, and pattern recognition. That is in fact what we were trying to do. We probably never articulated it that clearly in the enterprise search approach, but I mean that is what we were trying to do, and I think I was just working last night researching an article on semantics because we've had a rash of semantic announcements over the last few months, I guess, really, about how we're trying to tie these different capabilities together, and semantics ends up sort of being the agentic OS, but it does actually still take you back to the data's the problem, and it is the hard part when it comes to building out agentic AI or any AI solution,
or
right? The fact that we have silos. Yeah.
yeah, or indeed the overwhelming majority of enterprise software. Come on.
Well, I mean, see, I would say that's the cause, or at least a
Well, no,
part of the
you
cause.
just well, I'm all I'm going to say is I just run back to the same thing that everyone talked about years ago and talking about now, and we'll talk about again in the future. If you put garbage in, you get garbage out,
Mm,
and it doesn't matter how good the engine in between is. If
yeah.
you are feeding it poor information, poor data, then obviously it's going to produce poor results unless it's some sort of
Well,
magic that I haven't discovered yet.
no, you're and the bad thing about well, I mean, the good and the bad thing about agentic is that if you don't have the data, that doesn't mean it won't take action. So, like, they're not mutually exclusive, I guess, and that I mean, obviously guardrails and how you designed it and what the human's role is and all those things come into play. But my point there is that you have to have the data, or you're not going to have an effective implementation of any sort of an agentic system. And getting the data or having access to the data, which is growing in interest because you're talking about zero copy architectures, and the ability to put all the data wherever the data might be, but use it in one central way is important. But it also is probably the hardest part of any AI implementation, agentic AI implementation, particularly today. And a lot of companies aren't looking there. They only look past it to the whiz bang tool, but they forget it on whiz bang. Well, it might bang if it doesn't have the right data, but they're no whiz, just bang.
No, indeed. I mean, if only we had some sort of kind of central data repository, like kind of like a data. I mean, what do I call it? A warehouse, maybe. Uh,
I don't see. I think of a warehouse where I store stuff I don't really need so much, but
oh, he's on today. He's on.
I like
No,
the data lake because at least then I can go fishing for my data. I don't know. It's like
sure. Yeah. I mean, why not? I'm data sea, data ocean.
data ocean. I like that. I like that. Of
Yeah.
course, then you got to deal with data waves and data tsunamis.
Yeah. And yeah, my goodness. Yeah, let's not stretch this one any further
All
because
right, no, I think that's probably
we go off
good.
the
But
rails. But I'll say this, then it's interesting because, of course, the data warehouse was we're going to solve all the problems by having a data warehouse,
right,
and that was something that was a kind of a common theme for many years. And then the problem is, of course, and absolutely, look, some people were successful with them, some people were less successful with them. But again, it was down to that. One of my bosses many years ago used to talk about data quality like a river feeding a lake,
yeah,
and you can clean up the lake. Data lake. He was ahead of his time, clearly.
he was
Uh,
clearly. Yeah.
very ahead of his time. Data lake, you can clean it up, but if you don't fix the river that's feeding it,
Yeah.
then it's just going to get dirty again. I think that's kind of the classic issue that we see over and over again. And actually, at some point, I've no doubt we'll talk about kind of trading on kind of internet scale data as we have done.
Yeah.
But then if LLMs are producing more of the data that's available on the internet, it's like the kind of like infinity symbol where it's eating its own tail.
Well, I suppose that is the risk. I mean, obviously, the data problem is just going to continue as we continue to rapidly evolve with the technology around digital workforce. And I at least I would say we are starting to see systematic ways to go at this that don't mean you have to move all your data into the lake or the ocean or the warehouse or whatever the heck it is today. It can be left where it is and used wherever you need to use it, which is, obviously a big advantage and change over kind of how we were trying to approach that when all the data had to move into a specific repository or a series of repositories. And as we all know, data in motion's at risk. And then I guess the other thing is the capability. And I don't know if you saw this, but the Informatica, Salesforce Informatica acquisition closed this week, which is
Mhm.
timely when we're talking about organizational intelligence, because at least with Informatica's approach, they have automated a lot of the data maintenance, data quality, and even identification. So that I mean, I think that's where we have to go eventually here, because if you can't automate that process, there's just no way humans can keep up with the quantity of and the work level of what would take to maintain that data going forward.
Machine created problem, need a machine to solve it.
Yeah, well, exactly, exactly. And speaking of problems, no, just kidding.
There are no problems
Uh,
or any solutions or opportunities.
well, no, I was kind of laughing because I know what you're going to say about this, and Tropic's new valuation came out this week. Following the Microsoft Nvidia investments, and they put them in the $350 billion range for valuation, which is pretty big.
I mean, the only thing I can say is that is, oh gosh, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is a lot of money. I mean, it does kind of. Well, I don't know. I mean, I tossed another article in here that we can jump to maybe because it kind of ties into this, but the idea that is this a bubble? Is it not? And we keep hearing this
Oh.
argument back and forth. I don't. I mean, I'm not sure. I kind of discount the fear, gloom, and doom, but I'm an optimist.
Look,
So
I'm not a financial expert. I've never claimed to be. I don't know whether this is a bubble or not. We've touched on this in the past, which is we see huge amounts of money going in. We haven't seen, in my view, and maybe you have a different perspective on this,
mm,
a huge amount of return just yet on that money. And it swings one of two ways, right? It's either there's this huge return that's going to happen, or there possibly is less of a return than's currently expected. And it feels like we're
mm.
working towards that huge expectation. But we'll see. I mean,
I
it's
mean, I when I talk to companies about this, and I mean, I did a good bit of research for the book about that idea. I'm convinced that it comes down to what it has always sort of come down to with new tech is if you don't if you don't build the right foundation and implement it correctly inside your organization with all the change management that needs, then you're not going to see the level of return that you anticipate anywhere close to it because you just didn't do all the homework you needed to do to make it work.
no, that's a fair point. I think kind of fundamentally, yeah, you can give someone the coolest, and to borrow your phrase, whiz bang tool,
Mm.
and roll it out across your thousands of employees. But if no one's using it, then it's not particularly whiz or bang.
No.
So that's
Mm.
certainly true. I suppose the question that comes into my mind from an AI perspective is, do we have realistic expectations about what we can do with AI? And I think that's maybe part of the same calculation, right? So you say change management also is about expectation setting,
Yeah. Yeah.
in my
I mean, it is. It is. No, no, it is. And I actually, I think the thing that is becoming obvious to me, and you've seen the pace of acquisition has definitely increased over the last couple months, and I think that is a boulder going down the hill that's just going to pick up speed because that's a kind of a typical, you know. And again, the cycle's compressed maybe more this time, but that's sort of a typical tech cycle, right? We have all these new startups and then you have this acquisition phase where a lot of larger companies and the few unicorn crazy leaders like OpenAI and Anthropic and a few others, Perplexity, a few others, have really gained so much weight and momentum in the market that they can do acquisitions. And then at the same time, you start to see out of the bottom the fallout from all of the little startups that just don't make it. And that's actually I put this other article in there. It has an Indian focus because of the source, but it's seven startups that failed recently, the AI startups that failed recently. And I when I looked at it, I was interested to see like, okay, well, is there a clear trend to what's failing? And the answer to that, the short answer is no. But it was kind of um, there was actually one organizational intelligence startup in there that failed,
Mm.
but one's not a trend. There were two coding startups that failed, which that's a little bit surprising, but maybe not. Sales intelligence, there was one of those. There was enterprise AI, which it was kind of nebulous. Even tried to do a little research on the company, and it didn't. I couldn't. I couldn't figure out necessarily what their value proposition was, so that's probably part of the problem, right? But then there was the one that I participated in that is a little bit heartbreaking, and that was that was the humane hardware, the humane
You were
pen.
so excited about the
I
humane
was
pen.
very excited about it, and I still think the concept is good. And I have a rabbit that I bought at the same time, and I've still used the rabbit, but the humane pen was just useless. And it wasn't because the idea wasn't good, I think, nor even the hardware was very pretty. But the problem was that the execution was just not. The idea of having a screen that popped up on your hand was so cool, except it just didn't work. Like you couldn't control it from that. It just wouldn't work.
No, indeed, and I think they sold the assets. Was it to HP?
Yeah, I think HPE
Yeah,
maybe.
no, it's
So,
interesting. I mean, I know the humane's the one that I picked out on that list as well, just purely because I remember we spoke about it in the past. And I know, you and me share a lot in common in terms of our fondness for gadgets. I will
eh,
not lie, but possibly you exceed my enthusiasm for saying
well,
something.
eh,
Back to the point that we're meant to be talking about, which I've probably gone off from some time ago, is kind of fundamentally they're looking at it. I think it was one of those technologies that was before its time. So again, back to that
mm,
principles, right? It's a great
yeah,
idea, and we've seen it in TV and we've seen it in movies and read it in
yeah.
books, where you have this one all-concrete device, whether it's on your lapel or sitting on your ear or something like that.
Somewhere, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then it visualizes information when you need it visualized, or it just tells you if you don't. I would not be surprised to see that happen in just the same way when when I looked at um, the AirPods the first time. Obviously, you're wearing the big Max ones, but the little ones that kind of just sit in your ear.
Mhm.
It's just amazing. Just people see them walking around with them all the time now. I know, I know you're a fan. Uh, I bought my husband some recently as a gift, and he is absolutely thrilled
They're
with them.
fantastic. Yeah, my kids all have them too because I keep passing down whenever there's a new version. I I go, "Here, take these, old Pros. I don't need them anymore."
That's the 21st century of hand-me-down. I remember getting hand-me-down
It
clothes,
is,
but
yeah. Well, so I was gonna say though, the hardware thing, obviously I keep playing around with them. The Rabbit, I think is interesting, but I'm not sure it's any better than just using my phone. But there was an earpiece one that I thought was gonna be really interesting, but then I'm not sure what happened to it. I haven't seen it yet. I know it was still, like under development. Maybe they ran into some problems. I don't know. But the interesting thing was because recently I traded my BMW in for another one, and I was thinking about that yesterday when I was in the car, and I got a little ad from BMW to about the BMW Assistant, and I'm like, I haven't really played with this much. I haven't had the car that long, and my car is actually a better edition of the Humane Pen than the Humane Pen was because it it has an AI assistant built in, and it has, all these, additional online interesting capabilities, including even the idea of the camera. Obviously, the external cameras are very complete there, and they have been for a while, mine even has an internal camera that I can just tell the assistant to turn on if I need to record what's happening inside the vehicle. I'm not sure what that would be
wow.
necessarily, but I mean, it's there. I mean, we are moving in a direction where, and I think my point there was that it gets integrated into things that you do regularly. It's much more useful than it is as an add-on thing that you're trying to make a use case for in your life, right? It was interesting having that pin on, but did it really mean it was any better than having my phone? Not really. In fact, probably less useful than my phone in a lot of ways. So anyway.
Interesting. Yeah.
Mm.
We'll see, won't we?
Yeah.
It's always been the wearables, always been whether it's kind of like the wristwatch TV and stuff like that.
Yep.
There's definitely a market there somewhere that's yet to come to the fore. I'll be interested to see what happens because I mean I'm a sucker for my watches. Everyone knows I love my watches.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
yeah,
have
no,
my extremely
I did the new, Apple Watch,
oh, yeah.
yeah,
At this
and
point,
other
I
ones.
think Mike will tell you and the audience that I just like put it, this podcast is not sponsored by Apple.
You would I know. Actually, I should probably hide the fact that I'm wearing AirPod Max.
But since I'm
Um,
in the UK, I'll do the BBC thing. Other brands of technology are available.
They
But
are
I think
truly.
what's interesting is that you'll never get me to get to about this is obviously not hugely expensive, but it's a hugely sentimentally valuable watch to me, and I like my mechanical watches and stuff like that. But it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, and I have mechanical, and I like mechanical watches too, and I switch back and forth. But I admit I do like the convenience of the smart
Oh,
watch.
yeah. But the one that comes up over and over again, it's interesting just on the devices side. You have it's Aura, isn't it, the Ring?
Yeah, yeah, I have the ring.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting one to see how that develops because they're
Yeah,
ever able to pack more and more into that.
yeah.
And it is such a convenient format now. How you get it to tell you stuff and do other things, I don't
Yeah.
know. But that's a problem for them to figure out, not me.
It's actually really it is very useful, and I've had it now for a couple of years, and I originally got it because I was having some problems with sleep, and so I wanted more granular data, and back then, of course, I didn't have this ultra Apple Watch. I had a regular Apple Watch, and the battery wouldn't last long enough for you to keep it on all night, so I couldn't collect that data. So I did that, and it did actually give me a roadmap to now I have what it says I have, very good sleep. I'm not sure how that's relative, I suppose,
Yeah,
um,
that's
but
excellent.
anyway, that's good. But the other thing
Well,
I thought you'd like about
go
the
on.
car, though, I just found this out this morning, is that inside my car you can stream videos to the screen on the front, and you can play games inside of it. Now, you'll be happy to know that it only does that when you're sitting still, but
That's good to know. Yes.
Mm.
That's very good to know. It's like I remember there was I've forgotten which car it was, but this was in the 1990s. I remember seeing this car. It's a big, fancy. I think it might have been a Mercedes S class, but I honestly don't remember. And one of the options was a TV, a little TV in the dash,
Eh?
in the center console kind of thing, really. And I was thinking, my goodness, that seems potentially distracting. And now look at the screens we've got.
I mean, the screen on mine is 2/3 of the front, like, of the
Yeah.
dash is covered
Oh
in
no,
screens now.
it's
It's
crazy.
crazy, and it's a mild hybrid. It's not even an EV, but some of the EVs, like, I'm like, this is better than my TV setup at home. That's that's amazing.
Well, to briefly attempt to return us back onto course,
Yeah, yeah. We should probably get back to the topic.
yeah, with regard to those kind of some of the AI companies that have exited, as it were,
Yeah,
the market. I suppose, I mean, the way that I think about it, and it sort of touches on that, you mentioned about there's all this speculation about AI bubbles and so on and so forth.
yeah.
I think, and I genuinely believe this, that there is value in AI. I think it's going to offer us lots of interesting benefits. But like so many other big kind of defining technologies, there's going to be lots and lots of companies that try, and not that many. Quite a small, kind of a relatively compared to the number that try, smaller number that succeed.
Mhm.
Um, that's my impression. I could be dead wrong. I fully accept that.
Yeah. I mean, this is that, right now, I'd say we all are coming at this from some different angles, but it is starting to be that period of time that, what they call it, the reaping, the the time when it starts to settle out. Because we have experienced that rapid growth with so many startups going at this, and that's a good thing, right? It drives innovation. And certainly from a larger vendor perspective, they start to scoop up the ones that have really interesting things that they wouldn't easily be able to build on their own. It accelerates growth, and overall it moves the market forward, even if there's fallout on the bottom, which is part of my argument against this. Like, is this a bubble or not? I don't know, but it doesn't feel like 2000 to me, 99 2000 to me. um and maybe there is still a little bit, and I suppose we should talk about Nvidia, but maybe there is a little bit of eating its own tail, which was the biggest problem with the internet bubble, was the fact that most of the money that was being made was made from each other versus made from selling out into the rest of the world.
Yeah,
And there's some argument about that right now because of Nvidia.
yeah, and I saw. I've forgotten. I'm sorry to say, I've forgotten which publication it was, but I saw something along those lines about kind of the flow of money between different vendors,
Yeah.
and there was sort of inevitable comparisons. I forgot what. Did people talk about Cisco as being? Was it in the? Yeah.
Yeah.
And kind of who's at the heart of things, and OpenAI and NVIDIA and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. Just naming those ones because the ones I remember off the top of my head. And it's interesting because I think we're in genuinely uncharted waters. I think there's similarities, which
Mm.
we are spotting, but we will see.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to shake out over the next couple of years, and we'll see what this looks like. But I don't, I just like I said, it doesn't feel that way to me. Now, don't get me wrong. There is money flowing back and forth inside of that circle of AI today in the tech world, but a lot of that is, it's not like a lot of what happened in the internet bubble were partnerships that move money around, not infrastructure. And
Mm.
in this case, and in that case, Cisco and Intel were definitely infrastructure plays, but they got caught in the crash as well. But not necessarily because they weren't, growing. It was just the whole thing, the whole bubble collapse, right? So that affected everybody. And now I don't know, but if you look at Nvidia and their earnings report this week was, very strong. We already hinted at that earlier, like 67% growth year over year and over 300% over the 2 year period. I mean, that's impressive.
Big money.
Yeah, it is. So I mean, I don't know. I guess we'll be talking about the bubble every AI Pulse episode for the next 12 months probably. But
I suspect
uh,
that there's a chance of that. Yes.
yeah, yeah. But interesting though. One of the things that started to come out, I saw I and I think I probably wrote something about this last year, even the fact that it seems like more and more collaboration tools are becoming sort of an operating system for business, and maybe they
Mhm.
were already moving in this direction before you added in the AI piece of it. But now, human to human, human to agent, agent to human, all those kind of collaboration models, you have to figure out how you're going to deploy that. And of course, Salesforce made a big announcement that they've moved forward with Slack in a lot of ways. They added, some really cool enterprise search capabilities and other things that could be useful MCP capabilities to connect other applications. And so more and more Slack and Teams and apps like that are starting to look like an operating system for the business. And then at the same time this week, I put this article in there. ChatGPT announces that they've added a global chat feature. So I mean, it validates what I was saying, but it is kind of a interesting thought. Like maybe, maybe this is gonna like a lot of times, and you see this kind of core of Slack, Teams, Zoom, a few others, and then all of a sudden, from some other angle, one of the big players that already has market share there comes at it from a different angle and disrupts it a bit. And maybe that's kind of where we're going with ChatGPT. And I suspect if OpenAI is introducing this, which they did this week, that it won't be long before Anthropic and perhaps even Perplexity has the same kind of feature built in too.
Yeah, I think it's a relatively natural progression, and I share similar thoughts on kind of the collaboration tool sitting across the top of a
Yeah.
whole range of other tools. And the integration of AI is one facet of that, of course, with our ability to kind of make it go get stuff for us or do something for us is potentially
Right.
interesting. But it's funny, isn't it? Because I think this is an area that comes up over and over and over again, right? So in my mind, I go to two places. One little bit was enterprise social network. Remember that?
Uh-huh. I do. I remember it well. Actually, I built a whole, practice around that at IDC, so, yeah.
Yeah. People don't really talk about it anymore, do they? Not that I hear anyway.
They don't talk about it, but this is kind of one of those typical things. We now have it, right? I mean, it moved to that point where it was just a thing, right? It's not like an
Yeah.
extra thing or however. It actually happened naturally. That kind of fallout, which you always expect when you have that big, surge of startups, but then some real clear winners came out. And
Mm,
not surprisingly, that Microsoft's one of those, right? Because Teams is included in every Microsoft implementation. So, if it's in there, a lot of companies do just use it because of that. And then Slack actually came in for the opposite reason. It was the popular one for developers and techie, and it kind of got in through the back door and then ended up being the standard across a lot of companies. Zoom coming at it from a different angle, and now perhaps the open AIs and Tropics of the world are going to come at it from that direction too. So
Yeah, we will see. The other place I was going to go with it. No, I agree with you. But enterprise social networking kind of evolved.
it did, yeah,
And it's interesting because I think we're talking about collaboration tools. I think that's the level to talk about it because it's literally at the
right,
highest point, really, right? Which is what is the medium that we, as kind of people work in companies with our colleagues, using to communicate with each other, and that's we've gone through kind of the mobile revolution and BlackBerry through to kind of smartphones of today and so on and so forth. It just reminds me though, I still have a very big soft spot in my heart for. Do you remember the Microsoft Windows Home thing from some many years ago, where you had
many
like this
years ago.
cute house kind of setting,
Mhm.
and you had a little dog that could tell you stuff, and there was a library and a desk where you could do
Mhm.
stuff like that. I thought that was super cool as a concept, and I think it's probably the kind of thing we might see,
Mm.
potentially could see it again because it's just
Yeah,
it feels like a more human way of interacting
yeah.
with what is increasingly, it was back then, it's even more so now, complex technology.
Yeah, and I mean, you do need, if you look at the, look at enterprise implementations of AI, agentic AI, digital workforce, whatever language you want to use there. That need is even more now than it was, because you're talking about not just human to human collaboration, which you could do by email. I argue that perhaps that's not the best tool for a lot of those kind of group conversations and work in general, but it does do something from a human to human perspective, but
Mhm.
and has never gone away. But the agent to human to agent piece of that, you do need something that can be real time as well as asynchronous, which is a good use case and a good argument for those Slacks, Teams, Zooms of the world, to be able to garner share there. So I think that's interesting, and interestingly enough, it's kind of like that top layer, and then at the base of it, there's another movement that ties into that, and that is the movement to have an orchestration platform or layer or whatever we want to call it, that allows you to manage the agents and gives you the capability to orchestrate everything across your business and link into that collaboration tool where the humans reside and are able to work with the agents. So Salesforce announced, observability tools for agentic AI this
Mhm.
last, I think, 2 weeks ago, which is a part of that, and we're starting to see governance and observability and compliance, all those topics show up in an orchestration layer that's a part of that agentic platform that businesses are going to need. And I think if businesses are going to be successful with this, they're going to have this sort of governance by design built into it.
Yeah, agree. I think it connects very deeply to the topic we talked about a moment ago, which is obviously the data side of things as
Yeah.
well, naturally. I think the other thing's interesting, and look, kind of to the point that we made somewhat earlier about kind of what comes out, from our blind spot, right? Or just a completely new, different approach and way of doing this.
Yeah.
I mean, fascinating because we kind of talk about UI and UX and kind of that user interface and providing one particular standard that's kind of meant to be
Right.
universal. I wonder whether the next iteration of this is completely personalized user interface, yeah,
Mm, yeah.
with a back end that can communicate kind of universally across to others. And I think that's
Mm,
interesting context. We all work different ways. I mean, just because I like a traditional office setup with what I regard as a traditional office setup, with lots of screens and my writing here and this and that and the
mhm,
other people don't work like that. Yeah.
yeah. No, that's fair, and I think that what we're starting to see already is the capability to tailor whatever agent you're interacting with. And in my prediction for next year, one of the things I talked about in CX was this idea of persistent memory across all of these agentic systems, which I think will add to that capability of having the ability to tailor it to you. And I've already started to see this in, my use of Claude and ChatGPT, in my local Jan-based, language model that the Jan's the user interface, and it lets me, manage a local model, which I have
Mhm.
now, which is now grown into even more, and you can personalize it. You give it instructions. You tell it, what is it? It's a research assistant. It's doing this. It's doing that. Set up all these rails, and in having that memory has really been a big help. I mean, just a simple thing like with ChatGPT this morning, I was working on a blog post and I go into ChatGPT and I go, can you create a cover image for this blog post? And it goes, do you want the ones in the standard way we do your blog or the one that in the standard way we do your new newsletter? Like,
Yeah,
that's a good question. And you're right. We need to define that.
yeah,
So, it is starting to be better at knowing what, because it maintains that persistent memory. And I think that's going to be a big piece of it too.
yeah. So I'm going to be the classic role that I often play in these situations. Sorry, 'cause I see the convenience of it, of course. I see the productivity benefit, of course. What happens if your ability, the right to be forgotten, for example, under GDPR? I don't know. It's the honest answer. I don't know. I'm not saying
Well,
it's possible or not possible.
no,
What I'm saying is
yeah.
it's remembering my preferences across all these different systems with this persistent memory. And actually, I go, I don't want to be remembered, which is my right under certain jurisdictions. Then how do
Mhm.
I expunge that memory across
Yeah.
all those different points?
I think you have to have an agent for that.
Indeed, this is something along those lines.
No, I mean, obviously the as far as the memory's concerned, in the specific cases I just mentioned, you can go in and turn that off and it
Yeah,
forgets everything.
absolutely.
So that, I mean, that is a critical capability. I don't think there's any question about that. And the more of you it remembers, the more there is to forget. And I mean, there's a yeah, I like it. I don't
and
know what else to say.
and
It's
there,
made
and
my
there
life
we
easier.
And there we reach the usual impasse that we get to on nearly every show, which is you're more optimistic about it than I am.
Yeah.
But I think fair. Let's move on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no. So we had a couple of new releases over the
Mhm.
last couple of weeks too that are interesting. I know ChatGPT released the 5.1, and I started playing with that last week, I guess, and I was really surprised about a few things there. One of them is that it's very, very fast. It's much faster than it ever was, which is good or bad, I don't know, but it was clearly obviously more fun. But the other thing that I noticed about it is that it's extremely thorough.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure how good that is or bad that is, so I'm not no value judgment there, but it used to just do what I told it and it didn't ask questions much. Now it asks me lots of questions for every conversation I have with it, which in some ways is good because it protects me from myself, right? It makes me slow down and go, "Oh, yeah, okay, no, I wanted you to do this thing. I didn't define that very well." So, that I thought was good, and then the other one was Gemini 3 and
Yeah.
its associated image, Nano Banana Pro, that they also released at
Nano
the same time.
Banana Pro. Yeah. Say that
Yeah.
3 times quickly.
I can't actually. So we're starting to see the new tools, and Gemini 3's gotten some really, really strong reviews. I haven't played with it as much because it just came out this week, but I am going to do a little more research with it over the weekend just
Yeah,
to
I,
see.
I need to spend some time with the new Gemini. I had a quick go with it, and it was, I will fully admit, it was a close to the end of my working day. I opened it up and it said I can do lots of new stuff like make you into a superhero, upload a selfie, and it made a very generous, diplomatic version of
You
me.
showed me that, and I
I
thought it was a
did.
really impressive image. It didn't look
It
anything like
wasn't. It
you, but
wasn't. It wasn't impressive. It wasn't anything to do with me.
Mm.
I mean, like Clark Kent, I'd lost my glasses, but then I think it probably needed to work a little bit with the bags around the eyes and the more generous chin and stuff like that. But apart from that, it was brilliant. But it's interesting. I actually have a big task I'm taking on today and tomorrow, and I'm going to be using 3 to help me with some of the research for that. So I'll be really keen to see if it can help in a way that is more useful than it was to me in the past. And it was plenty useful in the past, but if it's
Yeah.
better, awesome. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I think I'm going to play around with it a little bit more, and also the continue my experiments with Chat GPT 5.1. Um, I will say if anybody's using 5.1 and they get a little bit frustrated, if you just go back to it and you're really brutal with it, it'll fix it. Because like I finally got I went through this long thread on the over the weekend. I was trying to just get a simple image for the new newsletter, and it kept asking me questions and questions and questions. And finally, I'm like, "Would you just do the image the way we did them before?" And it goes, "Sure." And then it did it, and I was like, "Well,
But
that was
what
easy."
happens when it doesn't go sure?
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't gotten to that one yet.
So this I think you heard it first here, folks. Don't be into AI because it might decide that in the end it doesn't want to cooperate with you. I don't know.
Maybe it deletes you like you're talking about. You don't even know. I don't
Yeah, let's say they
know.
start pretty good, huh?
Yeah. Well, so that I mean, that's the list of topics I had for today, but of course, I do have one interesting one for our cool tech
Uh,
innovation segment.
I
So
am all in on this. You know, I'm a huge fan of this topic area, so do it.
yeah. Yeah. Well, so if anybody knows me, and a lot of the listeners probably have heard me talk about this before, during the pandemic, I bought a camper van, one of those nice little Mercedes Sprinter based things that my dog and I were traveling around in and staying in campgrounds and, parks and stuff. And lots of fun, and definitely was mentally good for me during the pandemic. But I get regularly updates on different kinds of camping equipment, tools, caravans, RVs, whatever. And this last couple weeks ago, I guess I got a thing from a company called Pebble that had built a new fully electric, self-sustaining kind of really cool um, caravan in the UK words, or RV in the RV trailer, I guess, in the US
Indeed.
words. And from a caravan perspective, it is I have to admit I'm really, really interesting. So it's pebblelife.com is the the site for the company, and their first kind of edition, the founders edition they've called it, is a really, really interesting, fully electric, fully self-contained. It has like 1.1 kilowatts of solar panels on the roof and huge storage capacity for electricity. Said it can run for 7 days without sun. So, having the capability to sustain for 7 days, and it automatically connects to your trailer hitch. Kinda cool, because that definitely is not my strong suit in backing up. And secondly, with the remote, you can drive it into your campsite without the car, and
Oh
and
man.
it's and you can, drive it around, and I mean, and it sets up. So one of my friends who I camp with, go RVing with some, he always goes like, "Yeah, the trailer." He has a bigger RV than mine, and he goes, "The trailers, I wouldn't have one of them because it takes you an hour or 2 to set them up. Not this one. You literally push a button, and within like 2 minutes, it's set up." So took away that one.
It just reminds me of being a kid. So my parents used to take us caravanning many years ago, and it was one of still is it's a fantastic experience and a cherished memory. But oh boy, do I remember my father getting upset about setting the caravan up and the difficulties of getting it leveled correctly. And this isn't right.
Mhm,
It is difficult in doing that. No,
mhm.
I love it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I had a look at the site and looked at some of the info on it. It's brilliant. I'm curious, kind of how much compute power this thing has got. It's certainly got a big energy capacity.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
wondered, does this mean that it can run a large language model as well in the background? I don't know. Just
I
saying.
maybe because it is actually, app controlled, and it is doing a lot of pretty intelligent, things. So I don't know, maybe maybe it
It
runs a
probably,
little local model.
I suspect, whether it does or not, it clearly has some fairly significant capabilities
Yeah.
on that
Well,
front.
and combine that with my car, if I could put the 2 together, my car is really smart. If I could get my travel trailer to be really smart, I could just, like, go along for the ride. Like, it the car drives itself now, and the
Uh,
caravan hooks itself up and parks itself, and I don't know. I mean, like,
I, you,
how good
you
is
know,
that?
I love my cars, but I have to be honest. I find less and less joy in driving just because it sort of seems like it's busier and stuff. And yeah, the UK has always had the challenge of small roads and too many cars,
Mm,
and the roads ain't getting any bigger, and the cars are getting bigger, and yeah. But
mm.
I think the idea of a self-driving car is extremely appealing to me.
I
Now,
tested it on our trip a few weeks ago, right after I got it, and I mean, you do it has the safety thing built in that you have to touch the wheel, but literally
right.
you can touch it with one finger. It doesn't care how you touch it, you just have to touch it. But it drives itself. And the coolest part was if you want to change lanes when you're on an interstate, you just turn the turn signal on and it looks and it says, okay, now it's good, and it moves over and goes on. I was like,
Wow.
holy crap, that's amazing.
So
Anyway.
I think I get the strong impression that your car has more technology than my 1996 model.
Just the tiniest bit. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's the 5G connectivity. That's what did it. It has its
Oh, yeah.
own,
That's probably tipped it over the edge for sure.
Anyway, all right. Well, that's the wrap for today. I think definitely all the time we have. Um, again, thanks for joining us today. Hopefully, you got something useful out of that. And as always, I'm Michael Fauscette.
I'm Tom Pringle.
Thank you for joining us, and hopefully, we'll see you on our next episode. And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review to help others find us. For more research on AI and other software, check out arianresearch.com. If you're an expert in AI, generative AI, or business automation, either as a provider or an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arianresearch.com. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arian Research production. I'm Michael Fauscette, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.